Hi, very happy New Year to you. It's 2023. It's Gene from maverickstar Observatory. Welcome. Guys, we need to do something this year a little different to what we did last year. You know, we cannot continue running the observatory and giving out the information to 99% of the people when 99% of the people make no contribution whatsoever. We can have 4,000 to 5,000 people view a video. We have nearly 20,000 people a week go onto the website and completely ignore, the donation links. And we've all seen in our own communities over the last 5-10 years the disappearance of locally run shops, DIY shops, across the range, doesn't matter, restaurants, pubs, they drop in like flies, and it's because they're just not being supported by the majority. And you know what happens? I don't need to tell you what is the outcome of that. If people use the facility and don't contribute nothing back to it, it goes, and we end up losing our ranges of choice. And that's why our high streets look the way they do, and that's why corporations like Walmart, Costco have managed to monopolise the way we purchase things. So that's what we're looking at. Now, this image we're looking at here, you would think that is a true representation today of famine. But I'll show you what a true representation looks like, and we don't need to anymore go to third world countries. We can just look at these first world countries, very rich countries like the United Kingdom, America, Canada, Australia, you name it, and we'll see images like this. I think if you're in the UK, you know exactly what we're looking at here. This is a food bank, and right now they've seen, just over the Christmas period, and largely as a result of energy prices increasing, which we'll get onto in a minute, but you'll see images like this: a 300% increase in the use of food banks here in a first world country, which is classed as one of the 7th richest countries in the world. The problem is they're running out of support and they can't keep up with the demand, and that means at some point the inevitable will have to be faced, just as we've seen already, with the shops, the restaurants across the range disappear. Now, famine, in my view, is largely being caused by a few things: war, climate change, and insane policies from organisations like the United Nations. And there's a problem that could be easily fixed. Just scrap net zero and CO2, trying to reduce CO2 to zero by 2030. Because if we continue allowing unelected organisations like the United Nations to continue in their path of pursuing this goal, we are going to see famine on a record scale in 2023. Hundreds of millions will die as a result of their policies, and we're already seeing it gear up, because when we look at countries like Denmark that have been told now by the government that you will shut your farms, and we're talking just now they've put a number down on the table, they want 3,000 farms to shut down. The Danes are responsible for almost 40% of the world's exports. They're the second world largest exporter around the world. And a lot of that grain goes to third world countries. Now, over here in the first world countries like the United States, Canada, the UK, European countries, we might have a little bit of wiggle room, let's say. We can reduce the energy, and which we have done, and I'm going to show you it's quite a shocking amount of energy we've reduced here in the UK in a record short period of time. You won't get your breath, we'll look at that soon. But the thing is, by following these policies, by crushing farms, we are adding to something that is already naturally taking place, which we should be fighting against. And that is a reduction of agricultural land, which is naturally going offline through the shifts in climate. Now, it's nothing to do with CO2. We're talking about a trace gas. Let's call it what it is. The amount of CO2 right now in our atmosphere is 0.4%. The amount that mankind puts into the atmosphere is 0.00012%. It's nothing compared to what is naturally being put out by our oceans and by land in gigatons. We will never achieve this goal. Yet we know why this is being done. Because of the money involved. I think I've worked out something, and I think you'll agree with me, that what we see governments and organisations like the United Nations and the World Health Organisation doing is deliberately coming up with excuses to funnel money into things that will never be achievable. CO2 is one of them. I want to go over now and show you the national grid, and we'll talk about CO2 and demand of energy and why that is going to be the case. So bear with me. So here we are at the British national grid, and it is no different to any other national grid around the world right now. You will see a similar thing taking place. So we can see quite quickly, looking at the pie chart on the left hand side, where the majority of the energy right now, and bear in mind, the time, 6:50, so there's no solar power being generated. If there was, there would be, more renewables being used to generate the demand. But I want to explain something here. The demand has gone down from 35.4 gigawatts to 22.9 gigawatts. And how they've achieved that is by putting the price up of energy 4-5-fold. You see, when you do that, less people use it and the demand comes down. And on a normal day, if your renewables are producing 5%, not like the dream figure that we're looking at there, 58%, if they're producing 5% of the total demand needed, then of course renewables is going to look good. This is something that has happened in a very brief time period. I'm talking 3 or 4 months, maybe 5-6 months, right? There has been a 30% reduction in demand. That means that people are puckering up on spending on their energy needs, and this has been orchestrated by the United Nations, putting pressure on governments to achieve net zero by 2030. Now, you remember that statement that Davos put out? You will own nothing, you will have nothing, but you'll be happy. This is the pathway for them to be achieving that goal. And if you think owning nothing in this world, in a capital system where you require money to live, or basically, purchase anything, rent, energy, fuel, cars, clothes, food, you name it, If you think having nothing in a system like that is going to make you happy, then you're delusional. But what I want you to understand is that is the direction in which we're moving right now. So just before we leave this, I want to recap on what they did. A few months ago, the demand was at 35 gigawatts. Renewables were just barely about to produce 5% of the demand. Some smart arse looked at these figures and come up with an ingenious way of making renewables look better. So it made it look like they was on target to achieve the 2030 net zero goal. So they whacked up the energy costs, demand went down, and that meant that the 5 or 10% that they would normally be producing on a good day went up to 58%. Right now, the only thing that changed in all these figures is the demand went down by 30%. And this is just the start. We are told that the energy crisis is going to be extended. They are going to continue putting up the bills for energy prices. So the demand is going to go further down. But you should know this. When you drive up the prices so that people can't afford it, yes, you're going to achieve your goal. They're going to achieve the goal, as we're already seeing now. Renewables responsible for producing 58%, and we haven't had the sun come up yet, so solar's going to kick in a bit later on. Won't produce a lot over the northern hemisphere because of the time of the year that we're in, short daylight sun hours. But this is how they're going about their business, and you need to know this. I don't know anyone else who is talking about this apart from a couple of friends and a couple of subscribers that regularly email me. You guys know who you are. But I bet even you guys are shocked at what we're seeing right now. How they are managing to make now artificially renewables look good by driving up the price of energy. It is shocking. And this is going to continue. So for 2023, we are going to see more famine. We're going to see an increase in the wars around the world. And now, moving on to climate. What can we expect over the next year? Let's get into it. So, briefly starting off with the rare anomaly that has come back after 780,000 years. I'm talking about the magnetic pole migration over the northern hemisphere. It is still migrating. And largely as a result of this migration, the climate is shifting on our planet. It should not come as any surprise to anyone that 35 years ago there was an increase in speed, and at that point in time when the magnetic pole started to cover more distance in shorter space of time, we have seen dramatic climate changes, which we're going to look at briefly. But in large, this is shutting down the arable agricultural land around our world, which means we are producing less. We are running out of land, and then we have organisations like the United Nations. At the time we're running out of land where we can grow crops and produce food to feed the 8 billion, which is an ever increasing number on our planet of people, we are being told to shut farms down, produce even less. This is insane. I sometimes wonder whether there is an alien race of people slowly shutting the ability for humans to survive on this planet. because if they dropped us in the hot water straight away, most of us would wake up and know if we stayed in that situation we'd be dead. But by bringing up the heat really slowly, they'll kill us off eventually at a slower rate, and no one may notice. I mean, that is just my imagination. It's not the reality of things, but it is the insane direction in which we're moving, because I can't for the life of me think of why, at a time where climatic events are taking place and have accelerated since the last 35 years, why you would then shut down farms that are the second world's largest exporters of food. They're shutting down farms when the arable land is being reduced. The ability, let me put it into perspective, the ability for human beings to produce food to feed 8 billion people is being shut down. Purposefully. They have the information on the table, and yet they are still pursuing this. The truth is, as I've already stated and shown, CO2 is a trace gas, and 0.4% of anything makes no difference on the grand scale of things. Let me show you just how the magnetic pole reversal has affected our planet live. Let me show you right now how it's affecting us. What we're looking at is the world's jet streams live this morning. We used to have, as I've pointed out before, a polar jet stream around 60 degrees, both northern and southern hemispheres, and then a subtropical around 30 degrees, both north and south. And these was nice perfect little rings that went round the northern and southern hemispheres, delivered regular weather patterns around 30 years ago. This today is something abnormal. These jet streams measure in some aspects 1,000-mile wide. They stretch right the way around the world, and they range not just at the 30 degrees longitude latitudes, both over the northern and southern hemisphere. We're seeing polar jet streams interchange with tropical jet streams both over the northern and southern hemisphere. And a more recent anomaly is what we're looking at here. Interchange over the equatorial regions between tropical jet streams, both northern and southern hemispheres. Our jet streams on our planet are becoming more extreme, and as a result the climate is becoming more extreme. It is going to get completely unpredictable. Now, over the last 30 years, the magnetic North Pole has been migrating at a slow rate because I believe it's in the strong field lines. But it's at the point, at 40 degrees of total migration over the northern hemisphere, that it will accelerate. And we're 3 months away from that. Around the end of March, we should see some activity in the change of speed in the migrating poles. And if what we've seen on a slow scale over the last 30 years is dramatic changes in our jet streams, then it will be hellish when them jet streams begin to move at a more faster rate. Now, at the moment, we know where the magnetic North Pole is heading currently. It's heading towards central Russia, and again, I believe it's taking the Arctic climate with it. It cannot be a coincidence that we have 3 anomalies that operate usually over the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. That is the rotational axis, which we've not seen a shift in yet. We have the Arctic climate, and we have the magnetic poles. They're not all there by coincidence. We've seen 2 of these anomalies move. If we see the third, the rotational axis, start to begin to move, then we are in times of unprecedented change. And the fact that agricultural land is going offline will make no difference at that point, because it will be anyone's best guess where to be at that particular time. The governments have failed to prepare. In fact, they're doing quite the opposite of what they should be doing right now around the world. If the United Nations stood for humans and humanity, it would not have policies where it shuts down countries like Denmark and bans farms from operating, and in turn bans, the second largest export of food to around, all the world, not just third world countries. An increase in wars around the world will shut down agriculture even more, like we've seen in the Ukraine. Extraordinary times that we're living in right now, and things don't seem to be improving. So it should come as no surprise that the outlook for 2023 is sadly going to be much worse than what we have seen in 2022 and 2021. And that is because there is no change in the direction of these policies. The chart that we're looking at goes back 450,000 years and clearly shows 5 peaks. These peaks are called interglacials, usually last between 12 and 15,000 years, and you can see CO2 rises after temperature has risen. So this proves that CO2 does not cause temperature changes. Temperature causes rises in CO2 and not the other way around, because you can see clearly on this chart temperature is first, CO2 followed. These are 100,000 year cycles. We spend around that 100,000 years in a warm period known as an interglacial. That is the peak of where it comes above the black line. You can see where we are at the end of this chart. You know where we go next, and that means we're going to be returning into a glacial period which will last around 85,000, 90,000 years, and that means our northern hemisphere and our southern hemispheres are going to change the way they look, and that is going to shut down agricultive productive land further. So now we have the magnetic poles changing climate on our planet. We have this cycle of 100,000 years returning, which is going to change the agricultural production on our planet. We also have organisations like United Nations aiming to cut CO2 in a short space of time, driving up energy costs, meaning that people are going to be making the choice between eating or heating their homes. You can see that all these things cause the same problems, and that is at a time where there has never been so many people on our planet. It's biblical. You hear the stories in the Bible talk about, the fruit will put on its tree and then it is time for the harvest. The earth will put on its inhabitants and then it is time for the harvest. We're at that time. It was only since we came out of the last glacial period that humans have been able to put large numbers of human beings on this planet, by reproducing. It makes me wonder that 100 years previous to this cycle that we're in right now, was there billions of people on this earth that built some of the monuments that stand today, like I don't know, some of the megaliths. And when the glacial period returned, did it shut down the productive lands, which reduced the numbers then? Because I'm sure that human beings have got some amnesia when we look at some of the artifacts, and we look at the age of these artifacts, and we look at the way in which these artifacts was made. And in some degrees, not all, it seems almost impossible that, we could ever accuse these primitive people of building with primitive tools. You only have to do a search on the internet for ancient artifacts, and now we're getting some people say that these ain't just 10,000 years old, these go back tens of thousands of years old, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years. Have we got amnesia to our true history on this planet? It's a little bit of a divergence from the topic which is most important, which is the time that we're in right now and what we're going to be looking at for the next year. But it does better, give it some thought. So when I say 2023, we could be looking at hundreds of millions of people dying as a result. Well, all the circumstances are certainly in place for that to be a reality. I've been mentioning this a lot in previous videos that I've done for you guys, and that is the talk about if every organism in your body went out for itself, your heart, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, you'd be dead in moments. And it is no different to communities, cities and countries. When everybody goes out for themselves, these places won't be able to function. When everyone says, I've had enough, I get nothing for my labour anymore. There's not enough money in the month for the month, let's say. It doesn't make no difference if I do 2 jobs and my wife works. We're not making ends meet. These are the things that people are already saying. And if you don't have a strong community, then you aren't going to have a strong city. And if all the cities aren't strong, you've got a weak country. Makes common sense. That is the direction we're moving into 2023. It is a bleak outlook. I'm sorry, it sounds pessimistic, but what is there to be optimistic about? Something needs to be done. If we're going to continue to be pacified by organisations and governments around the world, then nothing's going to change. If you don't step off the track when the train's approaching, the train will hit you. So, we need to stick together. We need to see a better outcome than watching 4,000 people, come for this useful information because it's unobtainable anywhere else. No one else has got Trimag systems set up for you guys so that we can keep an eye on what's happening. So we might be able to raise the alarm bells at short notice. That's why I'll mention just briefly the link. Let's start 2023 off on the right foot. Let's start by being, proactive and supportive. Not just on my channel, but in your community. Start with your family and your friends, then your community, and then things can grow from there. Encourage more people to be proactive. Don't feel powerless, because these people that are pulling the strings at the moment make up less than 1% of the world's population. Less than 1%. They're almost as common as CO2 in our atmosphere. Yet we're allowing them to manipulate everything. That needs to change. Guys, I'll leave it there. Wish it was more optimistic message, but it's the way it is. There's a link down there if you want to help support us. You can become one of our patrons. The link is there as well. But it needs to improve. I say what I usually do. You take care of your loved ones. As always. Bye for now.